really taking advantage of this precious opportunity to sit with like-minded people in cultivation of sensitivity to our inner experience as well as to our outer. Feeling that connection to sensations of the breath in the body and the invitation to let go of concerns of the future or thoughts of the past, and really arriving in the here and now, in the present moment, fully present for this practice that we share. Nowhere to go and nothing to do. Just enjoying the breath, enjoying being together. So welcome once again, everyone. Thank you for your presence and your practice. And thank you for that introduction, Sophia. It reminded me actually of a connection that I feel quite strongly between the practice of ecology, that science of understanding interconnection between living beings in the natural world, and the cultivation of Buddha Dharma, and in particular of loving kindness. One of the main kind of ideas that we come across in the ecological sciences is well, it's quite an old idea now, and relates to the kind of principle, or one of the main principles in evolution, being survival of the fittest. This idea that the way that beings evolve and change through time is through the pressure that's put on them in competing with other species, other animals, for limited resources. But it's also, I think, very, very important to recognize that in the last sort of several decades, probably going back to the 60s and 70s, there's another theme that is really emerging as being very, very important in the evolution of life. And that is actually referred to as symbiosis, this idea of a coming together as being important in the origin of life. Not so much this idea of continuous competition, but actually of cooperation. And in a sense, that idea that actually in order to survive and to grow, and not just to survive but to flourish, living beings actually need others. We need one another. We are continuously in connection, being supported by connection, be it through the plants that we maybe consume for food, or that give oxygen into the atmosphere to allow us to breathe. We can see it even more concretely in the dear ones that are close to us, which support us in our life. Our mother, for example, is a very important being, which in no way can we imagine life being possible without a mother. And it's actually quite a thrill for me to be able to say hello to my mother, Bev, who's sitting in the room with us today. It's quite special, even though I'm in Mumbai, and she's on Gumbaynggirr country is the correct pronunciation for that, near Dorrigo in northern New South Wales. So yeah, that's very special. This connection that we have with other beings is one that we cannot ignore. And for a long time, it's been recognized in the Buddhist tradition that cultivating awareness of connection and the special state of being that gives rise to is very, very important in the path. Actually, if we're interested in the cultivation of Samatha-Vipassana, this component of shamatha, this calming of the mind, is something that is not possible without this sense of well-being in the body. And one of the key ingredients in this sense of well-being is being kindly disposed towards others. If we are in a state of anger or ill will towards others, impossible for the mind to become calm, for the mind to become appeased. So even going right back to the very earliest teachings, the quality of relationship to others is understood to be very important in the path of meditation, bhavana, the cultivation of the path in the Buddhist tradition. And not just in the Buddhist tradition, all through the North Indian yoga traditions we find this quality of metta among the four immeasurable minds, or the four Brahma Viharas, to be very, very central, to be a very, very important quality of relationship for us to cultivate. And I'm sure as supporters and participants in the Metta Center activities, you will all be already familiar with the Metta Sutta, one of the key texts that conveys the kind of the essence of the practice of loving kindness. And you would know perhaps that this sutta was offered to a group of monastics who had gone to a place in the forest following the Buddha's instructions on cultivation, to go to a quiet place, a secluded place. In those days in North India, you can imagine that would have been quite a remote place, maybe even quite a wild place. And sure enough, these young monastics, when they went into this place, they actually didn't find it so easy to practice at first. They were experiencing a lot of disturbance in the form of noises in the night. If anyone has been camping, they would attest that the first time you go out into the forest, and every sound is strange, and the imagination plays a lot of tricks. Perhaps it was like that. In those days, they understood these things to be the result of spirits, almost like a haunting, yeah? So these poor monastics, they came back to the Buddha and reported that they'd been seeing heads without bodies and bodies without heads and all kinds of terrifying visions. And the Buddha actually offered to them the practice, or the sutta on loving kindness, on metta, instructions for the practice. And in doing so, offered them kind of an antidote to this fear. And sure enough, in going back to the place where they had chosen to practice and putting the teachings into practice, beginning to cultivate this heart, mind of friendliness, of love towards not just themselves or to those in that space, but to all beings, actually those very same spirits became their protectors. They actually became helpers, guardians of those monastics for the duration of their rains retreat. So I think we can all resonate with that when we are in a state of kindly disposition towards others, we are much less likely to interpret difficulties as being targeted directly at us, as being kind of a difficulty or a problem as such. We are much more able to see them as simply a condition that we need to practice with, something that we're able to kind of welcome in and deal with in a more responsive rather than a reactive way. So as an antidote to fear, I think we can all resonate with the importance of loving kindness. For those who are a little more familiar with the Brahma Viharas or the immeasurable minds from a Mahayana perspective, perhaps in the Zen tradition or the Tibetan tradition, we often find metta, loving kindness, paired with the practice of compassion. The Sanskrit and Pali, both the same, Karuna, has this root in kur, the Sanskrit root kur, implying action. So it's not simply, as we translate it, compassion, simply the capacity to resonate with another. It's also the capacity to understand that suffering of another can be relieved. And the practice of Tonglen, of giving and taking, may be familiar to some of you. This is a very typical practice in which this idea of friendly disposition towards another is combined with compassion, the ability to resonate with another's suffering, and the real heartfelt wish that suffering be relieved. Just very briefly, for completeness, we should recognize as well that these four often go together, and the next two, Mudita, is often translated as joy or even altruistic joy, this capacity to resonate also with not only the suffering, as in compassion, in Karuna practice, but also with the successes, with the happiness of another. So rather than giving way to perhaps a resentment that another is finding success, we find ourselves met with an opportunity actually to enjoy along with another their happiness as though it were our own. So we don't miss out on a single opportunity to enjoy in this way. And then lastly, Upekkha, perhaps one of the most important practices in a way. This word in Pali and in Sanskrit, Upekkha, it has this implication of having a broad view, of seeing both sides of the story and not taking sides, but welcoming both just as they are. So it's often translated as equanimity, this kind of balanced perspective. And it's not to be confused with indifference. This is where we kind of are aware of the situation, but in a kind of an attitude of not caring. Here there is a sense of caring. We're turning towards the situation. Perhaps there is a conflict that we are aware of. We are recognizing that there is suffering here, but we are impartial in that we see both sides of the story, and we are not giving way into craving or clinging to one side or another. So these four immeasurable minds, they also have this sense of being not so much emotions, though there is a very important part that is kind of a bodily feeling, which we'll come back to later. They can be described actually as fundamental qualities of our humanity. They're actually one of the important things that makes us human, the capacity to resonate with another, to feel their suffering, to wish that that suffering be relieved, to resonate with the joy, the success of another, and to recognize both sides of the story. These are clearly very, very important qualities of relationship to our experience that make us who we are. And in recognizing that, it's also, while in daily life we might feel that we're not always able to respond in a kindly way when difficulty arises, for example, or we're not always feeling like we have the capacity to resonate with difficulty. Sometimes we feel that a situation might be overwhelming. Even though that may be the case, we can be sure that because we are able to recognize the value in these qualities, we are also able to emulate them. We have the capacity, even if it's in seed form, we have the capacity also to cultivate this boundless heart mind of love, of kindness. So I think it's very important to, while the name Brahma Vihara has this implication of, well, Brahma is kind of this word implying divinity, nobility, kind of the supreme. It's something that actually is ennobling. It's not that it's out of reach, up on a pedestal, something that we can never hope to cultivate. It's something that in cultivating, we ennoble ourselves. We bring forth what is in us, also divine, if you like, in the North Indian traditions. This is often the image, it's something that makes us deeply human, I would say, is another way to interpret the Brahma Vihara. The divinity is also something very, very human. So important to recognize as well for a practitioner, there is also some pitfalls in the path of practicing loving kindness or any of the Brahma Viharas, and they're described in the tradition as the near and far enemies. Actually, you can think of the near enemy as something that is quite similar to the practice, but it's not the same, and the far is more like the opposite. So it's helpful when we're in the practice to recognize very clearly what these qualities of relationship are. And in the case of Upekkha, we can perhaps have an idea already. I mentioned, the near enemy, the thing that is quite similar to equanimity, but not the same, importantly not the same, is that indifference. And of course the opposite is more like clinging. It's more like partiality, taking sides. In the case of mudita, joy or altruistic joy, the similar quality but not the same, the near enemy, we can think of it as being kind of excitement or exuberance, kind of like a party atmosphere, you know, just only looking to the next big thing. The far enemy, in this case, is something more like resentment. It's almost like a sense of jealousy. We might fall into that when we are losing contact with that practice and we are experiencing someone else's success and kind of wishing that it were our own, rather than taking that opportunity to enjoy the other's success as though it were our own. Because, you know, really, in the sense that we are all connected, it is quite possible to, with practice, cultivate that connection as well. I already mentioned the near enemy in the case of Karuna, of compassion, as being the sense of overwhelm. There's a lot of things going on in the world these days, and if we read the news a lot, or we are aware of conflicts around the world, desperate situations that people find themselves in, sometimes we can really have the feeling to not be able to hold all of these things that are going on, that we become overwhelmed. And that image of wishing to be able to help someone but not being able to swim ourselves, as it were, is a very powerful one. And so it's important that we are able to kind of ground ourselves and not fall into the trap of overwhelm if we're practicing compassion practice. And the far enemy, of course, is cruelty. Is actually actively wishing suffering upon another, which I'm sure is not a dimension that we would fail to recognize as practitioners. Coming once again to loving kindness, this practice of friendliness, actually the word metta, I'm sure many of you are already aware, it does have some kind of echo, cognate with some of the other European or Indo-Aryan languages, with friendship, like we have amitié in French. And I believe, though I haven't done some kind of exhaustive etymological study, I believe it's probably also where we get just the simple Australian idea of mateship. Yeah, it's just this sense of friendliness, of wishing that another not come to harm, that they be well, that they be happy, free from suffering. And the near enemy, of course, I think you will all already be familiar with. Yeah, the trap that we can fall into is kind of this attachment. It's this friendliness or love with strings attached, sort of wanting to keep that other close. And of course, the far enemy is this sense of ill will, of wishing that being not be happy, not be free from suffering. So we have these qualities of relationship to our experience, qualities of relationship to other beings, that have this kind of divine or in some ways, I guess, sort of superhuman ambience about them. Like, how is it possible that we can follow these instructions to cultivate this heart of loving kindness towards all beings, when we as practitioners recognize that in daily life difficulties arise, we're not always able to kind of respond in loving kindness? Well, the answer is we start small. We recognize that this is a practice, this is a cultivation. In the Buddhist tradition, we're always reminded that meditation is really a translation of the word bhavana, which has this image more like cultivation of the earth, like gardening. And we know that when we are planting a seed, when we wish to grow a vegetable, a lettuce, for example, we know that we can't take a lettuce seed and open it with our fingers and pull out the leaves of the lettuce in that way. What do we have to do? We have to prepare the soil. We have to select the seeds that will give rise to a lettuce. We have to plant them at the correct depth. We have to cover them with just the right amount of soil and water them. And then we allow nature to provide the light and the conditions for a lettuce to arise. It's the same with the cultivation of shamatha and vipassana, same with the cultivation of loving kindness, of metta. We create the conditions for loving kindness to arise. And one of those important conditions, of course, is this kind of sense of stability in body and mind. We might choose to begin, rather than in the heat of the moment when already difficulties are arising in communication, in relationship, in daily life, we take time set aside in our day to sit, just as when we're cultivating awareness of breathing, for example. We set aside time for this cultivation. And on the base of that sense of calm and ease in the body and mind, we can then, very importantly, give rise to an image in the mind that for us is straightforward and simple to connect with this quality of loving kindness. So this is a very typical way to introduce the practice of metta. We might choose a loved one. It might be a human being. It might be a other than human being. I understand that ducklings are very effective, for example. Kitten, it could be any kind of animal. It seems funny, but actually if we just gently experiment with that for a moment, giving rise to that mental image, and we connect with what's going on in the heart space, we may be able to detect a subtle shift in the quality of sensation in the heart space. And we can be quite sure as human beings that this quality that we feel, this sensation that we feel is indeed loving kindness, is indeed this well-wishing, this sense that this being may be well. The image of a small creature like a duckling, you know, it's something that's vulnerable. It needs protection from its mother. It needs care in order to be safe from harm. So we are quite deeply habituated to respond to that mental image with this feeling of loving kindness. From there's a couple of different pathways in the traditional cultivation of metta. We can transfer from there to a mental image of ourselves, and then give rise to the same sense of loving kindness towards ourselves. And only then do we move on to another being for whom we have some maybe more challenges in cultivating loving kindness. It might be someone that is kind of neutral. So someone that we just met once or twice, someone that we see in the supermarket, or a neighbor a few doors down. We don't know them so well. We can move on to this kind of a little bit like a gym exercise for our capacity of loving kindness. We don't start with the heaviest weight. We start with the easy weight, and then we move on to something a little more challenging. And again, we give rise to that feeling in the heart space. So it's very important that these practices are embodied. They begin in the body. Just as awareness of the breath begins in the sensations that we feel, the touching place of the nostrils and upper lip, or the rise and fall of the belly, depending on what tradition we're in, so too in the cultivation of loving kindness. We always return to this felt experience in the body, in the heart space. Only then maybe we can feel confident to give rise to a mental image of a being towards whom we find it particularly challenging to respond with loving kindness, with care, with the wish that they be safe from harm. Perhaps a being that we have the perception they have caused us harm in the past, or we have some difficulty, some anger coming from the past. Seeds of aversion are watered by the mental image of this being. And we work again with coming back into contact with the felt experience of loving kindness in the body and directing it towards that being. So you can see, this is why in the title of the session today I included this phrase, breaking of boundaries. My teacher Bhante Dhammadipa has highlighted for me many times how in the cultivation of the path in Buddhism, often we are challenged to dissolve some of our habitual boundaries that we put in place, the lines that we draw between ourselves and another, for example, or between in the case of shamatha, between sensations at the touching place or sensations in the whole body. We're often challenged to extend ourselves beyond our habitual patterns. And so I thought that this phrase, the breaking of boundaries, is a very important one, because it's highlighting how in the practice of loving kindness, we begin with an object towards whom it's very simple to cultivate loving kindness. It's not stretching our boundaries at all. And then we slowly move out into new territory, expanding that envelope, expanding the capacity of the heart-mind to embrace other dimensions of our experience, from the more kind of neutral right out into the very much more challenging domain. Beings towards whom we may even feel hatred or anger as the result of past suffering memories, seeds in the store consciousness that were watered by difficulties in the past. Another method which is kind of in the same domain of breaking of the boundaries or dissolving of boundaries, or a method which also highlights the importance of that dimension of the practice, is where we actually explore the possibility to expand that feeling from the heart space on the base of an image that we find it straightforward to give rise to loving kindness. We expand that out into our whole body, and then even beyond the body into space that we share, and then maybe even beyond that out into the world. And in the Metta Sutta, which I hope might have time, if you would allow me, I would be happy to chant the Metta Sutta later on. We have this line in which the heart of loving kindness, of boundless love, is expanded in all directions. So, Mettanyacha sabalokasmin manasam bhavaye aparimanam uddang adhocha tiryanyacha asambadham averam asapatam. So this boundless mind of love pervades the whole world, above, below, and across, without any obstruction, with no hatred and no enmity. So there's this very strong image of transcending our habitual boundaries, the lines that we normally draw. This is me, this is another, this is my circle of dear ones, the ones that I care about. This is the other people that I'm not so concerned with their well-being. Instead, we are cultivating this possibility to expand, to open our heart-mind, to incorporate all beings, human and other than human, large and small, seen and unseen. These kind of phrases may be familiar to you all already from the Metta Sutta. So there's this real sense of dissolving the boundaries, and I think we are aware in these times that we live in, there's a lot of conflict in the world. We just have a glance at the news every day, and we can see that there's a lot of boundaries, a lot of lines have been drawn, fences and walls being built, and conflict arising because of this illusion that we continue to solidify between ourselves and others. We have this idea that another's well-being is not connected to my own, that if another suffers, then I have a chance to be free of suffering, when in truth, actually, as soon as another is suffering, I also am affected. My well-being is affected. When one suffers in a community, all suffer. So this sense that we can slowly work with our habitual patterns is really central to the cultivation of loving kindness, and it's very complementary if we have more like a Samatha-Vipassana background, more like a breath awareness focus in our practice. Very, very complementary in the sense that when we are practicing to become more united with our meditation object, if we are interested in the practice of the jhanas, for example, again, we are dissolving the boundary between the mind and the meditation object. So we're cultivating the same kind of sensitivity, the same kind of skills and flexibility of mind, of heart-mind, when we cultivate loving kindness, as we do when we cultivate shamatha and breath awareness. Same when we cultivate the other Brahma Viharas, when we cultivate Karuna, compassion, when we open the heart-mind to the suffering of another being, allow ourselves to resonate, to tremble with. One of the synonyms of Karuna is anukampa, the sense of trembling with another. We can open ourselves up to the joy of another, removing that boundary of jealousy or resentment, and we can open ourselves up to a balanced perspective of all phenomena, rather than continually falling into the trap of partiality, of seeing right and wrong, good and bad. So yeah, I feel like I can only share what my teacher has shared with me, that the Brahma Viharas, and especially metta, it's really a practice very much for our time. It's the kind of antidote, just as it was in the time of the Buddha, antidote to fear and anxiety, an antidote to division, to hatred and enmity. It's kind of a balm, and again, it's one that is not divine in the sense of being out of reach, but divine in the sense that it makes us fully human when we bring these qualities into their fruition, when we're no longer falling into the traps of overwhelm or attachment. We're really able to even briefly explore the possibility of opening the heart mind to welcome in all beings into that same sphere of care. Wow, it really is, our humanity comes to fruition in that moment as well, I firmly believe. So perhaps I will ask at this point if there's any questions or queries, and then I will give a more detailed guidance and instruction into the practice on the base of that expansion in space. We'll work with the expanding out into the space around us today. So I'll hand over to our MC, who's going to facilitate. If anyone has any questions at this point, or comments, or examples in their own life where they've found metta to be a useful practice or a challenging practice even. So over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, brother. That was such a great explanation of the Brahma Viharas, and particularly for metta, and very inspiring in terms of the practicality of using this in our uncertain times as well. Thank you so much for your sharing. Now over to the group. So whether you are here in person at the Metta Centre or online, if you have any questions or if you have any reflections from that talk, then you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask, or you could also put it into the chat. And for those who are here in person, we've got some paper and pen that you could write your questions on as well. So brother, we have someone here at the Metta Centre who has put her hand up. So over to you.
I just had a question about the topic, dissolving boundaries. And one of the things that I've been struggling with is applying boundaries and setting safe boundaries as well for, like clinical practice, or, when working with difficult people and things like that. So I'm just wondering whether you have some suggestions on navigating that space as well, about setting safe boundaries. Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Yeah, this is such an important question. I'm very glad that you asked this. So I think for me, the key, just as with shamatha vipassana, so too with the Brahma Viharas, the key is the foundation that we cultivate, the foundation of calm and ease in body and mind. It's an embodied practice. The capacity to choose the object on which the mind is resting is fundamental to the cultivation of shamatha and vipassana, to the cultivation of breath awareness, as it is in the cultivation of the Brahma Viharas. When we are dealing with the distractions that inevitably arise in breath awareness meditation, for example, by very patiently choosing to return our awareness back to the meditation object, be it the sensation of the breath at the touching place on the nostrils or upper lip, or the rise and fall of the belly, or sensations in the whole body. If we are in a Tibetan tradition, we might be visualizing particular colors of light or particular points in the body. Distraction arises in the sense of like a narrative, a story about the past or the future, and we very patiently, time and time again, return our awareness to the chosen object. And in doing so, we cultivate a very deep connection with that object, and one that's very relaxing, calming, easeful for the body and mind. It's a resource. It's like a drink of cool water on a hot day, or a plunge into a cool stream in the middle of the desert. You know, it's like a resource of nourishment for the body and mind that gives us time to stop, to put aside difficulty and cultivate ease and indeed joy and bliss in body and mind. It's on the base of this that we are invited then to work with more difficult situations, more difficult emotions. In the Sutra on Full Awareness of Breathing, we move from awareness of the body and calming the body into awareness of feelings, and positive and negative, or pleasant and unpleasant and neutral feelings. We move from the base of nourishment in bodily awareness and ease, calm, the shamatha, the abiding in calm, as it's often translated. We move from there into the more difficult terrain, as it were. The same in the cultivation of the Brahmaviharas, the cultivation of loving kindness. We start with a more simple object that is simple and straightforward for us to give rise to that sense of loving kindness, and only then do we move towards a situation, a being, a relationship that gives us difficulty. So we're kind of recognizing our limitations, in a sense, recognizing the capacity that we currently have. Those examples are in the domain of formal practice on the cushion. When we go out into daily life, our experience is, I'm sure you will agree, is very different. Yeah, we're in relationship. There's a lot going on, a lot of communication. There's impressions, sense impressions coming in from outside. There's a lot arising from our unconscious seeds from our past are being watered. Concerns for the future are arising. Again, we are invited to draw on the resources that we cultivate in our formal practice in order to be able to voluntarily bring our attention towards that which is most important in the present moment. And in some cases, that may be taking time out. It may be that we recognize that we are overwhelmed in this situation. If I'm in a state of overwhelm, flooding emotion, of anger or sadness, it's not a good time for me to be trying to communicate or cultivate relationship. It's a time when I need to be able to come back to my breathing, come back to my body. I might even need to remove myself from a situation, practice walking, connecting with nature, things that are once again nourishing resources for me to be able to work with the more challenging situations. So it's very much, even though there's this sense of dissolving boundaries, it's also this sense of recognizing where our capacity is at. And while we might have the aspiration to cultivate a boundless heart of love towards all beings, in the heat of the moment, off the cushion, that may be very challenging. And we just need to recognize that it's on the base of a formal practice, a cultivation, when we are setting aside time, diminishing the distractions, really concentrating on the instructions and doing our best to embody the practice. That's when we're cultivating the resource. So it's kind of like the two wings. Yeah, we need both of them. The aspiration alone, while it's very beautiful and might support us in making the time to practice, is not enough in the heat of the moment when those situations are overwhelming. So this is kind of a dualistic interpretation. If you wanted to get more technical, and there may be some Zen or Mahayana practitioners among us, there is also this recognition that actually the concept of another is just that, it's arising in the mind, and it's possible for us to let go, even in the present moment, to let go of the attachment, the clinging to those feelings of suffering and difficulty as they arise. So there's also this sense of the reason why shamatha and vipassana is always hyphenated, or it ought to be always hyphenated, because there is always an opportunity to be recognizing the true nature of this experience and letting go as well. And in the case of perhaps working with professionally with people who have difficulties, we have this, I suppose, this invitation to really work with acknowledging that all of this experience is arising in the mind and is fundamentally is conceptual. And this can be helpful for us to kind of detach a little bit and to reduce the amount of the watering of seeds of suffering in our own consciousness, in our own unconscious mind, that is coming from another's suffering, if you like. So there's a few different toolkits. It's not enough time maybe now to go into so much this more Zen or Yogacara approach, but you can kind of see that it's very important to be aware of our own safe space, our own kind of boundaries, even as we're practicing with the aspiration to connect and to be able to transform not just our own suffering but the suffering of another. I think it's a very important, and it's kind of the key to the path, and it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of practice. And I mean, a wonderful thing to do is to connect with Sangha, with community, and to be able to reflect and have reflected back aspects of the practice that we might not be so aware of, or perspectives on a situation that we might not be so aware of. So yeah, I think that's not much of an answer. It's more just an encouragement to continue, I guess, and to recognize, that it's a long process of cultivation. Maybe we can come back also to this question of like daily life practice towards the end of the session. Again, I can offer a few little tips, more from my personal experience, not so much from the sutras, but my personal experience of how to welcome in those difficulties without feeling overwhelmed. Thanks for your question.
Thank you for your response. And I think that would be wonderful to have some practical tips about how to bring this into our daily life and use this to meet the circumstances that arise. So we do have another question, and the question is this. Hi, brother. Thank you for your teaching on metta. I like the analogy of cool water on a hot day. So my question is less related to metta. I'm curious about your experience in different traditions. What is it that attracted you to Plum Village after having tried many different sects of Buddhism?
Thank you for the question. And I think it's quite a beautiful image. And I think this sense of refreshment and ease that maybe is conveyed by the image of a cool water in the desert is something that many of us might have experienced in visiting a Plum Village center. This sense of calm and ease that pervades that space. So for me, in a way, it wasn't so much at the end or at the beginning. It was kind of in the middle of my path that so far that I encountered the Plum Village teaching. My first introduction into formal meditation practice was in the Tibetan tradition. And it was only when I was later traveling and working in Europe that I had the opportunity to go and visit Plum Village Center. And I really had that experience of coming home, just as Thich Nhat Hanh shares one of the walking meditation kathas as being arrived at home. I really felt that invitation to kind of come home into the present moment in going to Plum Village. And I think, well, more generally, one of the things that I find most helpful in Thay's teaching is that he was such an amazing scholar as well as practitioner, and recognized the importance of the very earliest teachings of the Buddha, the very basic practices of shamatha and vipassana, as well as the later developments in the Mahayana, the Yogacara philosophy, a more kind of non-dual perspective. And similar to my main meditation teacher these days, Bhante Dhammadipa, has this I got this real sense that Thich Nhat Hanh was teaching that there is only one Buddhism, really, and actually those principles are even common to all spiritual traditions, and that it's through coming back to the present moment that we are able to heal and transform. And I think also in regards to the Plum Village tradition, I was very inspired by how practical, by necessity, Thay's teachings are. That they were born in the midst of first a civil war and then the Vietnam War, in a situation of terrible conflict, of division, splitting communities, splitting families, and in a with the aspiration to be of service, to be able to be of service in healing those divisions, Thich Nhat Hanh recognized how important these basic cultivations were. So they're not something that's kind of looks good on paper. They work in a war zone. So that for me was very inspiring, and yeah, it continues to inspire me very much. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you, brother. That's all the questions that we have for now, but I think we can move now to the next part of the program. So I understand we'll be doing some meditation.
Sure, yeah, that sounds very good. Less
Wonderful.
talk and more practice, I think, is always a good thing, isn't it? Yeah. So dear friends, in interests of creating the best conditions possible for our cultivation, we come back once again to a comfortable sitting position, finding connection with the earth or the cushion, the seat beneath us. If we're sitting in a chair, we might want to come forward slightly in the chair, make sure that our feet can touch the floor. We might want to close a door, turn off a light, or switch off a phone or something like that, just to allow us to come fully present into the practice in the present moment. On the base of that grounding in the body, we can become aware of the sensations of the breath in the body, and remembering that in the cultivation of metta, of loving kindness, we are practicing an embodied awareness. So we are aware of sensations in the body just as we find them, and remembering that we're going to make use of some mental images, beginning with a being towards whom we find it straightforward to give rise to loving kindness. And we can experiment with different images there, like a human or other than human, a loved one, a teacher, or literally a duckling or a kitten, or something vulnerable in need of care, towards which our heart immediately and instinctively resonates with the sense of care and kindness, that they be free from suffering, free from harm. And we'll explore the possibility of expanding that awareness outwards from the body. And if at any time you find it confusing, overwhelming, or you wish to return simply to the sensations of the breath in the body, please feel so welcome to do that, recognizing our limitations, recognizing our boundaries. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, resting in awareness of sensation in the body, breath in the body just as it is. Breathing in, aware of the in-breath, sensations of the breath in the body, perhaps at the touching place, the nostrils and upper lip, perhaps in the rise and fall of the belly. Breathing out, aware of the out-breath just as we find it, letting go of tensions and distractions, relaxing the whole body, calming the mind. Breathing in, aware of the in-breath just as it is, coming into contact with sensations of breath in the body, cultivating a continuity of that awareness throughout the whole duration of the in-breath, beginning, middle, and end. Breathing out, aware of the out-breath just as it is, cultivating continuous sensitivity to sensations of breath in body, relaxing, calming the mind. Breathing in, aware of the in-breath. I invite you now to track the sensation of the breath as it passes in through the nostrils and over the upper lip, down into the heart space, becoming aware of sensations in the heart space just as we find them. Perhaps as a sense of spaciousness or density, a sense of expansion and contraction, perhaps a vibration or tingling, perhaps no particular sensation that we can name, but just resting patiently in awareness of the heart space, allowing sensation to arise just as it is. And breathing out, relaxing into that awareness, letting go of tension in the body, distractions in the mind, aware of sensations in the heart space, just as they are. Breathing in, aware of the in-breath, connecting breath and body, aware also of sensations in the heart space. Cultivating this connection as our anchor in the body, a resource of presence, embodied awareness. Breathing out, relaxing the body, calming the mind, connecting to sensations of in-breath and out-breath, sensations in the heart space, just as we find them. Breathing in, aware of the in-breath, I invite you now to explore the possibility of giving a rise to a mental image in the space in front of you of a being towards whom you find it very simple and straightforward to give rise to a sense of friendliness, benevolence, of loving kindness, perhaps being human, perhaps other than human, perhaps a dear one, a pet. Allowing that image to clarify. And as we breathe out, connecting once again to sensations in the heart space which arise in dependence on that mental image, allowing them to be just as they are. Perhaps a sense of expansion or warmth, perhaps a subtle vibration or tingling. Any sensation at all, confident that what we are experiencing is valid for us in the here and now. Resting in that awareness, letting go of distractions. We can repeat inwardly to ourselves in relationship to that mental image, May this being be free from pain and suffering, free from fear and anxiety. May they carry themselves, body and mind, all in happiness. We can visualize the effect that this embrace of loving kindness and warmth has on this being, perhaps in the sense of ease they experience in the body and mind. We can directly experience that same benefit in our own body, resonating with their experience of loving kindness, guided by in-breath and out-breath, letting go of distractions. Breathing in, aware of the in-breath, I invite you now to gently explore the possibility of allowing that sense of embodied connection in the heart space to expand outwards from that center, out into our own body. We can refresh using the mental image that we first used at any time, but we can also explore the possibility of expanding that embrace of loving kindness and awareness of sensations out into the chest and the upper body, shoulders, the arms and hands into the belly and the hips and lower body, the legs and feet. Allowing that expanded sphere of loving kindness, of well-wishing to embrace the whole body in the heart space, out into also the head and the neck, from the crown of the body, of the head to the tips of the toes, embraced in an expanding sphere of loving kindness. We can repeat inwardly, may I too be free from pain and suffering. May I be free from fear and anxiety. May I carry myself, body and mind, all in happiness. We can visualize the effect that this embrace of loving kindness, well-wishing has on us, perhaps in a smile on our lips or a sense of relaxation and ease in the body, directly experiencing it as we do so. And breathing in, aware of the in-breath. I invite you now to explore the possibility, guided by in-breath and out-breath, anchored in sensations of breath in body and sensations in the heart space, to expand that sphere of loving kindness, benevolence, of friendliness, out from the body into the space that we share, embracing also the beings in that space, human beings, beings other than human, beings large and small, seen and unseen. You can allow that embrace to expand beyond that space to the neighborhood that we're sharing, the building that we're in. We can repeat inwardly, may these beings too be free from pain and suffering, free from fear and anxiety. May they carry themselves, body and mind, all in happiness. We can visualize the effect that this embrace of the warmth and light of loving kindness has on these beings, and the sense of ease in body and mind that they experience. We can directly share in that experience in our own body and mind on the base of sensations in the heart space. Returning at any time to that anchor, refreshing with our primary metta image at any time. Breathing in, aware of the in-breath. I invite you now to gently explore the possibility of allowing that embrace, the warmth and light of loving kindness, that sphere of friendliness to expand still further beyond the neighborhood that we're in, out into the landscape or the region, perhaps the whole state or continent. Anchored in sensations of breath in body, sensations in the heart space, expanding the sphere of loving kindness in all directions, above and below, across without obstruction, dissolving those boundaries. We can repeat inwardly, may all beings, human and other than human, large and small, seen and unseen, wherever they may be free from pain and suffering, free from fear and anxiety. May they carry themselves, body and mind, all in happiness. We may be able to visualize the effect that this embrace of the warmth and light of kindness and care has on countless beings, the ease they experience in body and mind, the freedom from suffering, the peace. We can certainly directly experience it in our own body and mind, in a sense of calm and ease, of loving kindness and care. Resting in that awareness, allowing it to deepen, clarify, returning to our primary metta image to refresh our awareness of sensations in the heart space if we need to, expanding that sphere of kindness in all directions. And if distraction arises, we can gently acknowledge that distraction. Return, guided by in-breath and out-breath, to sensations in the heart space, refreshing with our primary image, expanding that sense of loving kindness, the light and warmth of benevolence and well-wishing in all directions without obstruction. May all beings be free from pain and suffering, free from fear and anxiety. May they carry themselves, body and mind, all in happiness. Karaniyamata kusalena yantang santang padang abhisamecha sako ujocha sujocha suvachocha samudo anatimani santu sakocha subharocha apakichocha salahu kavuti santindriyocha nipakocha apagabhokule suananugidhu nachakudang samachare kinchi yena vinupare upavadeyam sukhino va khemino hontu sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata ye kechi panabhutati tassa va tavara va navasesa digha va ye mahanta va majhima rasaka nukatula ditta va ye vadita ye chadure basanti avidure bhutava sambhaveseva sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata na paro parang nikubeta nati manyeta kata chinankanchi vyarasanna patigasanya nanya manyasa dukkha micheya matta yattani yang putang ayusaya kaputa manurakke evampi sababhutesu manasang bhavaye aparimanang me tanyacha sabalokasmi manasang bhavaye aparimanang uddhang adhocha tiryanyacha asambadham aveiram asapatam titang charang nisinova sayanova yavatassa vigatamido etang sating aditeya brahmamitam viharam mitamahu titinya cha anupagamasilava dassanena sampanno kamisu vinayagedham nahi jataka bhasseyam punareti. So dear friends, as you slowly transition from that state of more inward focused awareness to an outer awareness, perhaps making adjustments to your posture, you might like to put the hands together and generate some warmth, and give that warmth to the eyes. Give yourself a gentle massage of the head and neck, shoulders, offering oneself some care and kindness, perhaps the kidneys and lower back. And as you do so, I'll just read the translation. I'm sure you're all familiar with the text, the Metta Sutta, but this line beginning, Matta yatta niyankutang, just as a mother would protect her only child, even at her own life's risk, so let them cultivate a boundless heart towards all beings. Let this heart of boundless love pervade the whole world, above, below, and across, with no obstruction, no hatred, and no enmity. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, as long as they are awake, one should develop this mindfulness. This, they say, is the divine abiding here. So thank you so much for your patient attention. I hope you found some benefit and some inspiration to continue and deepen your practice of loving kindness. We're sort of drawing towards the close of our session, unless I'm mistaken. But I would just like to, as promised, just reflect a little more on some concrete ways that I found helpful in the practice of loving kindness. And actually, it's something that I discovered on a recent walking meditation retreat, which we organized through yatra.org. If you're interested in this kind of cultivation out in nature, in the beautiful wilderness places that we find in Australia, please go ahead and have a look at yatra.org.au, I should say. And it regards this sense of spreading out our capacity, expanding our capacity to welcome in difficulty when we might feel our habitual instinct is to kind of react and to push away. And it's something that I noticed when walking in community, that if there's a difficulty in the group when you're walking together in nature, one person is struggling with the heat or cold or pain or something, then the whole group immediately feels that. So it becomes very, very real, a very tangible experience of how closely interlinked our well-being is with one another. And I found that if I was able to visualize that difficulty in the group was part of my direct experience, it's something that was in my body or in my mind, almost like welcoming in another's difficulty as one of my own habit energies, if you like. I was able to kind of, it almost seems like a little trick to allow me to welcome in that difficulty in another situation into my own kind of embrace of kindness and care. Even though I wouldn't say I'm an expert in taking care of my own suffering, just by swapping the place of the other for myself, I was able to come into contact a little more easily with this idea of expanding a sense of care and benevolence towards another. And I think you can do the same in the reverse. When one is experiencing a difficulty in oneself, an arising, a watering of a seed of anger or fear, for example, and you imagine it to be like a friend who is struggling, like a dear one who is having a difficulty, and one that you might be able to help them with by simply being present for that or comforting them. Again, it's just like a swapping places. It's just welcoming in that situation. And even though one might not be expert in taking care of one's own suffering, I feel like if each of us looks deeply, we know that we have that capacity of being present for a friend who is struggling, yeah? So we can cultivate the same attitude towards our own seeds of difficulty as we would towards a friend. So that's just a kind of a concrete practice that I found, where you can work with difficulty arising either within or outside in a relationship, and kind of dissolve those boundaries, those habitual patterns that we have to kind of react, to respond by pushing away our own suffering, when in fact something that needs to be taken, needs to be acknowledged, or pushing another. And the same is true. Actually, another's suffering is our own if we look deeply, and is something that is when we have the capacity, is possible to be also welcomed in and taken care of. So thank you all again so much, and I suppose I will let our MC kind of decide if there's time for any more last questions or reflections. I would really love to hear any kind of feedback, things that you found helpful or confusing, or experiences in your own life and practice. And yeah, thanks again for your attention.
Thank you very much, brother, and thank you very much everyone else for your questions, and thank you, Tina, for your facilitation. I love that the session today is a combination of the Dharma talk, practical meditation, as well as practical advice for daily life. So you covered everything, brother. Thank you. And now it's just up to us to take it off the cushion and off Wednesday talk and integrate it into the rest of our lives, 6 days, 7 days a week. So thank you, brother, again, and thank you, everyone. So did you want to do another like dedication of merits, or are you comfortable sort of you've done the chanting? Usually we like to close off with the dedication of merits or prayer on our Wednesday talks, but it's up to you.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's no other questions, then I would just like to just acknowledge my teachers and to share that if there's anything that has been of benefit, then it's definitely thanks to them. And if there's anything that has been confusing, it's due to my own unskillfulness, and I apologize for that. And yeah, we can close with the dedication of merit. I can recite a simple dedication of merit in Pali, if you wish. Yeah, also just to recognize that actually the cultivation of loving kindness is in itself kind of a dedication of merit, that if we practice wholeheartedly, we are sending out our well wishes that all beings may benefit from the practice. Etam vata chamehi sambatam punya sampadam sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etam vata chamehi sambatam punya sampadam sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Eta vata chamhe sambatam punya sampadam sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. May you all be well, and wishing you many, many peaceful steps on the path. And thanks again for your presence and practice, and for all at the Metta Center for organizing.